What's going on, FA Nation? Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream. I am James Grande. Across the way, we have Adam Ronis. Adam, you were the man with all of the knowledge today for the 9-game main slate we have on tap. You did the playbook. The optimal lineups are out now, example lineups rather. How you feeling about today's slate?
Well, I think we need some news on Minnesota until we say we can feel great. Obviously, they've been a pain in the butt over the last couple weeks. They don't give us the news in time. They did yesterday. So obviously, Karl-Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, they're both questionable. Jeff Teague is listed as doubtful, so at least we can expect him to sit. But that's obviously going to be big for this slate because Minnesota Golden State is probably one of the more popular targets on the slate.
It's funny because we talked about it on the podcast last night, how they actually gave us the news yesterday. And then one day, what's the difference from yesterday to today? Did these guys suddenly, they're magically better? I mean, Wiggins is only an illness, so maybe he's actually better. But I mean, we've been going on and on with Karl-Anthony Towns for weeks now. I don't think one day is suddenly he's just going to be feeling amazing. So it's a shame we haven't gotten that news. But it is 9 games. It is 6:05 already. I say let's jump into the slate, shall we?
Let's do it.
Starting us off at point guard, I think across the board it is just easy, especially on FanDuel today, to just plug and play Luka Doncic. There's no Kristaps Porzingis. There's no Tim Hardaway Jr. He's probably the top play of the slate, right?
Yeah, he has to be. I mean, in DraftKings, it might be a little bit more difficult to fit him in because of the price tag, $12K. There is enough value where I think you can do it in cash games. On FanDuel, it's hard not to play him. I mean, 10-8 is underpriced for what he does. And on this slate, we really don't have a lot of guys to pay up for. So you mentioned Porzingis is out. Hardaway's out. We've seen without Porzingis, their usage rate's over 40%. Brooklyn team, that's a good matchup for him. So to me, like, you just have to hit the lock button on FanDuel.
I almost think our ownership projections are a lie. I would say on FanDuel, Adam, I'll throw a number at you. In cash games tonight, Luka Doncic over under, I'll put it at 70% for cash.
He should be over. I don't know if he will be. He got to be. He has to be, man. I mean,
I'm going over in cash.
Who are we paying up for on this slate? If you're not, and there's plenty of value, especially if we get the Minnesota news before lineup lock. So where are you spending your money tonight?
Right. I agree 100%. Even if we don't have the Minnesota value, we still have Golden State value, and we still have guys that we're going to talk about at other positions. Someone that we were talking about before live stream, Lou Williams, who's really cheap. So there are a lot of routes to go. I'm going over with or without the Minnesota news. It's too easy on FanDuel. But we do have the rest of the position to break down. Some other guys you have here in the playbook. In the mid-tier, we have Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Lowry, and De'Aaron Fox. Why don't you break down that tier for us?
Yeah, I mean, look, Dinwiddie's very consistent. I don't really see a way to kind of get him in tonight, as I was kind of just putting some lineups together. Again, he's fine because we know he has a high floor, and he's been excellent with Kyrie Irving out. You know he's going to take a ton of shots from the field. He's got at least 45 DK points in 4 of the last 6 games. So he's not going to be very popular tonight if you want to go in that direction. Lowry's not a great matchup here against Miami. But the last time he faced Miami, he shot 2 for 18 from the field and still had 41 DK points in 41 minutes. So the most appealing thing about him is the usage with all the injuries, and he's going to play a ton of minutes. I mean, he's averaging 38 minutes per game. And the last time Miami and Toronto played, the total was 231. So I know the total tonight is around 215, and just because it happened last time doesn't mean it will. But, Lowry can get there, and he's not going to be highly owned. But Fox is probably the guy I like the most. It's a really good matchup here against Memphis. The minutes are back up, and I think this is a pace that's going to suit him well. He can push the ball a little bit, and so he's definitely someone that I want to get in there in some tournaments tonight.
Something interesting to note about that Kyle Lowry game, too, Pascal Siakam was active, and he went 2 for 18 and still put up 40 fantasy points. There is no active Pascal Siakam tonight, just, if we haven't realized by now. Moving down the list, Aaron Holiday and Shabazz Napier are probably the top values here at the point guard position, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Napier certainly, obviously, has been excellent the last 2 games. Usage rate of almost 25%. and he's taken 31 shots from the field the last 2 games. Now against Golden State, pending, obviously. And even if Andrew Wiggins plays, see, I think Towns doesn't. I think Wiggins has a shot because it has been just an illness. Right. So, I mean, yeah, Wiggins obviously is going to have a real high usage. We've seen him against Golden State have a big game earlier. But I think Napier's still in play. Obviously, he won't be as appealing. But yeah, he's pretty cheap tonight, especially on FanDuel at $5K, man. You put him and Luka together.
Yeah, and there you go. Another route to getting Luka just comfortably in your lineups, playing Shabazz Napier as your point guard too. Moving over to shooting guard position, Fred VanVleet tops the list, followed by Devontae Graham and the aforementioned Andrew Wiggins. Now, Wiggins is probably, I shouldn't say probably, definitely too cheap over on FanDuel at $7K if he plays, considering it's not only just one game, it's a 2-game sample against Golden State, averaging nearly 50 fantasy points. I would say of those 3, he would be my favorite if he played. But do you lean VanVleet's way, Graham's way? I mean, how do you break down this tier?
Yeah, I'm not spending up here. You could go Graham if you want because of the matchup, but I don't think you need to. Again, VanVleet, same thing like Lowry. It's just such a high usage rate, and he's playing huge minutes. Again, it's not the ideal spot. But I think I'm spending down at the position. I mean, Wiggins, the problem is on FanDuel is lineup locks at 7 p.m. Eastern. We might not have that news. So certainly don't do it in cash. If you play several tournament lineups and you want to put him in one in case he does play and you get him a loan ownership, fine. But it's definitely a risk. So you have to understand that.
Right. Some slate breaking news here. Gary Harris will play.
Oh, that is huge. That changes everything.
He will also start in case, anyone was really worrying about Gary Harris not playing tonight. The shin is okay. Moving down the shooting guard list, we talked about it for probably 10 minutes prior to the live stream starting. Lou Williams is, at least on FanDuel, is probably one of the more lock and load players. He's going to be one of the highest owned players, but $5,200. No Patrick Beverley, and he gets Detroit. Is there a way that we fade him in cash and in tournaments? I don't see it. Do you?
I think it's difficult. I mean, you could always fade him in tournaments if some people always, worry about the ownership, and obviously it's going to be very high, but it's difficult for me to sit him. We know when he has it going, he can just put up points in bunches, and with no Beverly, I expect him to play a few more minutes. Of course, you worry about the blowout here. 12.5-point favorites. Detroit is just a mess. But, people said the same thing last night about Milwaukee. They were 18-point favorites, and that game came down to the wire. So we sit here and project blowouts all the time. And trust me, sports betting perspective, man, when it looks like it's easy, it never is. So I'm not going to worry about it. I think he's going to play minutes regardless. It's a good matchup, and he has at least 7 assists in 3 consecutive games, and it could jump here. So, yeah, it's just too cheap on FanDuel. Sometimes don't overthink things and just go. If you're worried about ownership, worry about it in the other areas. Just take Lou Williams and move on.
Let's just sit here and stop worrying about blowouts, because now in the last week we've got the Heat being upset by the Wizards, sans Bradley Beal, and yesterday, I mean, who even played for Minnesota and down to the wire against the best team in the NBA. So
and people went away from Giannis thinking, all right, he's going to play 25 minutes. I'm not going to spend up to pay that money. And then you see what happens. Now, a lot of times, maybe 6-7 times out of 10, the blowout happens and you look smart. But we just seen it over the last week. I mean, Orlando at home losing to Atlanta. I mean, we just see a lot of these games that just don't play out like we think. If I was forced, I would say the Clippers cover tonight, but I'm not putting money on it right now.
Right. Well, let's just talk about the rest of the shooting guard position. Buddy Hield, always a fine GPP play, has been good lately. You have Damian Lee written down, another Golden State guy. I think Golden State is going to be pretty popular tonight, considering their injuries. And then DeLon Wright. Do you prefer one to the other in cash, or are they all GPP plays to you?
I mean, Lee is fine. He's been very consistent. I think Wright is definitely a tournament play. Dallas, obviously, there's going to be some value. We didn't talk about Jalen Brunson, but you can use him. I mean, he's cheap. He started the last game, wasn't great. Seth Curry certainly is a GPP play. I think he's 4K, and we know if he gets hot, he can explode. So trying to figure out Dallas is a little tough. It's a great matchup against Brooklyn. But the one thing about Wright is we've seen him do it in limited minutes. In fact, his last game, he played 26 minutes, was the most he's played in a while. And he actually had one of his worst games. But it's a good matchup here. And for the 5 previous games before that one, he had at least 30.3 FanDuel points and didn't play more than 23 minutes in any of those games. So certainly a guy that can go off and you want to consider in tournaments because of the matchup. And no Tim Hardaway, no Porzingis, usage should go up for Wright if he gets the minutes.
Yeah, he's so peripherally sound. He's very good on defense, and he can provide us with those counting stats. We talked about it last night on the podcast. You could play 4 Dallas guards tonight. Who knows, other than Luka, which one is going to go off? But Brunson 3-4, Curry 4,000, DeLon Wright 4,300, all very appealing price tags. Let's move over to the small forward position where I find it very interesting. Yes, it's because price, but Paul George is projected to be the highest owned player over on FanDuel. I guess my question to you, Adam, and I know it's a good matchup, and the Clippers have the highest implied total on the board tonight. How much exposure do you want to Paul George? I guess on a site that forces you to play 2 small forwards without multi-position eligibility.
Yeah, looking at it, I don't think you have to. I understand why people are doing it because we mentioned there's just not many guys to pay up for. You could have a lineup tonight with Luka, George, and Drummond. And it looks good. I went through it on FanDuel. I was like, wow, this is pretty good. So that's why people are doing it, because I think if this was a different slate, we wouldn't be talking about that ownership percentage. But the price is so low. And again, even if there is a blowout, he should get to at least 40, 45 FanDuel points in this game with this matchup. And, he's another guy too, especially with Lou Williams, assuming he comes off the bench, George is going to see the ball in his hands a little bit more too with the first unit. So that's going to help. He's got a 32.2% usage rate without Beverly on the court. And he had 9 assists last game when Beverly was out against the Kings. So I understand why people are doing it. To me, it's based on the slate. If we had, Harden and all these other high-priced guys, I don't think you would see his ownership at that level. Right. But I do see other small forwards that you can go to on FanDuel tonight. Usually it's a tough position, and we're like, oh, okay, he's the best guy. We got to get him in. I don't think you have to tonight.
Yeah, and some of the other guys you're alluding to, first and foremost is Alec Burks, who we saw explode in his last game. Didn't get any sort of price bump on FanDuel. Still $5,600, probably one of the chalkier plays of the slate. We should be locking and loading Alec Burks into all of our lineups, at least on FanDuel, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably one of the top plays on the slate. We have seen at times, if he's not hitting his shot, he's not great. But it's a really good matchup against Minnesota. They're one of the fastest-paced team in the league. D'Angelo Russell is out. Last time he faced Minnesota, he had a huge game, 50.4 FanDuel points. So at this price, just put him in. Golden State's been playing better lately. I've watched them a bit, and they've actually been a lot better over the last few weeks.
And another small forward on that same team is Glenn Robinson, who is coming off a big game, and another Golden State Warrior who FanDuel, and I hate to just keep talking about FanDuel, but FanDuel has been the site notorious for failing to price their guys up, and this is one of those slates that they did it again. $4,700 for Glenn Robinson, coming off 34 fantasy points. I think we can go right back to the well on Glenn Robinson as well.
Yeah, he's obviously benefited as well from some of the injuries. And again, a good spot against Minnesota, 39 minutes the last game, that overtime game, and he had 25 points in that. And we've seen him have a few good games this year when he's been asked to carry a bigger workload.
Do you play Jarrett Culver if Andrew Wiggins is active?
I think you can. He's only, especially on FanDuel at 4,300. I'd probably go in a different direction, but I think you can, especially in tournaments, because there still might be enough for him to produce there, even if Wiggins plays. And Culver's played big minutes over the last couple games.
And one more guy here, your small forward. Actually, 2 more. I missed your boy Seti Osman. Joe Ingles, who gets a really nice matchup against Chicago, and Seti Osman, nice value for, And he's going to be less than 5% owned across the board. I think you could definitely go to Cedi Osman in tournaments. Let's move over to power forward, where I don't know if he's your favorite player in the league, but he's damn close. Bam Adebayo, tough matchup, no doubt about it. A tough matchup against that Toronto front court. But he's still too cheap on DraftKings at 8,100.
Yeah, certainly in tournaments. I mean, I'm probably not going to play him tonight, but just put it out there because that's what you want. You want a guy that's going to get low ownership, and I just don't see many people playing him tonight. Everyone has this concept, oh, Miami, Toronto, terrible, don't want to attack that. Two pretty good teams. So, Bam at 8,100 is just too cheap because he can go for 50, 55 points. Probably unlikely tonight. But if you're into, playing multiple lineups and you're looking at ownership, Bam's a guy that can separate you from the pack tonight if he goes off.
So Adam, we have some news, some non-Gary Harris slate breaking news, and it is in regards to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Karl Anthony Towns ruled out. Jeff Teague ruled out. Andrew Wiggins ruled out. So the same exact scenario we had last night. Noah Vonleh also ruled out. Treveon Graham also ruled out. So the exact scenario from just last night is going to be played out again tonight. I think it is pretty safe to say in cash games, Napier is now one of the chalkier plays. Jared Culver is going to be one of the chalkier plays. Robert Covington at 5,200. As we are at the power forward position, I think this is a perfect just place to go. I know we have some names higher than him in terms of price point, but another guy who's just too cheap, 5,200 on FanDuel, too cheap on DraftKings at 5,600, considering what he's done for us and the type of run he's going to get with all these guys out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple cash game slate tonight, man.
Yep.
You're playing several Timberwolves, some Warriors, Luka. You could do George on FanDuel, Drummond, and there you go. Lock it in. So, yeah, no, at least we got the news early, and we saw it last night with the Timberwolves. They were all pretty good. It is a back-to-back, but at home against Golden State. So, yeah, just roll with all the Timberwolves tonight, man, in your cash games.
I guess that was going to be my question for you, because it is a back-to-back, and, they are playing at home, which is obviously beneficial to them. But at least in a cash game format, do you worry about tired legs? Because let's be honest, there's going to be three of them, probably 40 to 50+% owned in cash. Do you worry about having three of them in your lineup in cash games? And would you play only two, or are you not worried at all because it's Golden State and you're playing three in cash?
I'm not worried about it in cash. The ownership in cash, not as big a deal. Right. And, some of these guys haven't played a lot this year anyway. So they shouldn't be that tired.
Right.
For real. So, and the prices are just too good. So in cash, I don't worry about it. Obviously, tournaments is different because ownership is more important there. You're trying to separate yourself. But in cash, no, I think don't overthink it. Just play these guys.
Shabazz Napier, 48 shots in his last three games. Just for reference, he has
Doncic and Shabazz and cash and move on.
Yep. And it's perfectly fine for tournaments as well, because you could be looking at 100 points from your point guard position by the end of the night. But we do have the rest of the power forward position to break down. Kevin Love in an excellent spot against Charlotte, who's one of the worst, if not the worst, team against the power forward position. We also have LaMarcus Aldridge and Richaun Holmes here in the upper mid tier of power forward. Do you have a preference of Love, Aldridge, and Richaun Holmes?
Yeah, Love and Aldridge, definitely the preference there. And I think there's a way to fit both in on FanDuel. Obviously, there's, we talked about Covington and there's a couple guys below, but I think in tournaments, that might be a little bit of a different build, putting Love and Aldridge together. I don't think people are going to want to spend up for those two. Aldridge has been playing really well lately, shooting 54% from the field over the last 7 games, at least 45 DK points in 5 of the last 7 games, double-doubles in consecutive games, 10 blocks over the last 4. And I don't think a lot of people are going to look at him tonight.
Well, I don't think a lot of people are going to construct the rosters like that at all, because we do, like you mentioned, we have the Robert Covingtons of the world. But then we have the ultimate value, at least on FanDuel, Marquise Chris, 4,300, starting once again. Christian Wood, $4,100 still on FanDuel, only 5,100 on DraftKings. Chris, 54. I think both are fine prices. And then someone that I find, actually two more people that I find very interesting. Three, it's a very, look, power forward is a very deep value tier, right? We have a lot of value to choose from. Brandon Clark, probably tournaments. Nemanja Bjelica, probably tournaments. A lot of ownership projection on him on DraftKings rather. Chris Kleber Wood. How are you going about this position? Because like on DraftKings, we could probably fit 3 or 4 of them in because, multi-position eligibility. But on FanDuel, we can only play 2. How are you like deciphering between site? Chris, probably a priority on FanDuel?
Yeah, probably Covington, Chris, and Wood are probably the 3 top guys there. So that I think you look that way in cash. And then in tournaments, you could go in any direction you want. Again, because I think it'll be pretty spread out amongst the other guys, and that's what makes such an interesting position tonight, especially on a site like FanDuel.
Yeah, and Maxi Kleber, for the record, went off without Kristaps Porzingis the other day. Nice correlation play with Luka Doncic if you're trying to get more exposure, pairing someone with Luka, because we're expecting the triple-double. Someone has to score on the end of those assists, and maybe it's going to be Maxi Kleber here filling in for Kristaps Porzingis. Let's round it out at the center position, Adam, where Andre Drummond is probably, it's Luka 1, and then there's a large gap on who the second best play of the slate is. It's probably Drummond. We talked about it last night. 37 minutes in a 22-point loss. He's not going to come off the floor even if this game blows out, right?
I doubt it. Again, each of the last 2 games, 37 minutes. So they're going to need him on the floor to stay competitive. He's had 2 big games in a row. Blake Griffin, doubtful. He's probably not going to play. So they just have to ask him to do so much right now. And, 3 straight double-doubles. So, again, we just don't have many guys to pay up for. And we have all of this cheap value plays now that you feel fine. He's 9,800 on both sites. He should at least 5x that, even if it is a blowout.
Do you play, considering the blowout, are you playing Drummond in cash games?
I think you can. Again, we talked about the blowouts and sitting here and worrying about it. I just think there's enough to fit in tonight. And, there's a couple good other centers that you can go to for sure. But I think Drummond still has that high floor unless they just – but even last night, the Lakers were up, 43 points in the first quarter, right? We thought the game was over, and look what happened. So even if that happens tonight, I think Drummond still stays on the floor. They're going to need him. So I'm not really worried about it in cash games. I think he's a good play tonight.
I agree. Just wanted to get your take. But there are some other centers, as you mentioned, like Rudy Gobert, who has the best matchup on the board. Probably a really nice pivot off of Drummond. Just my one concern would be how much upside will we get at Rudy Gobert at nearly 9K?
Yeah, that's the biggest concern for me as well. The Bulls play at a slow pace. The over-under's kind of low. But we've seen Gobert in these favorable matchups absolutely smash. And I think, he'll probably get to, 40 to 42. But is that going to be enough at his price? Probably not, but in tournaments, if you want to go away from the Drummond ownership, he's definitely in play. And, he's had a double-double in 25 of the last 26 games.
That is a pretty large sample there for Rudy Gobert. Let's finish up the center position. We have the likes of Tristan Thompson, Gorgui Dieng, and Montrezl Harrell. Preference between the 3. Again, another Minnesota guy without anybody active on that team. Is he the favorite? Tristan Thompson gets Charlotte, the best spot we can. And then Montrezl Harrell, he's really cheap for a guy who has 30 actual point upside.
Yeah, I think Dieng is obviously the best play now that we know that Towns is out. And, the price is rising, so maybe that keeps some people away. They're going to look to the other Minnesota players first. But Dieng certainly is still in play. And Harrell's interesting for tournaments because – he has struggled lately, battled illness the last game, but we know that there's big upside there, especially, when him and Lou Williams are rolling together. And it's a good matchup against Detroit. So I think you have to consider him in tournaments at that price.
Adam, it is 6:29. We have 31 minutes to roster lock. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'm just glad that we got this Minnesota news early. It makes things easier. Certainly, if you're playing cash games, you know where to go tonight.
That'll do it for us. We'll be in subscriber chat for the next 30 minutes leading up to roster lock. Adam, pleasure as always, and we will catch you guys later.